Welcome to Wine Wanderings. Today, I'm live with second-generation owner and proprietor Chris Kenefick of Kenefick Ranch Vineyard and Winery, located in the Napa Valley, Calistoga, California. Thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Well, Chris, I know you grew up watching your late father, Dr. Tom Kenefick, driving vineyard operations in your 250-acre ranch, which I think you have about 125 acres vineyard as part of that. And you've adopted his love for the world of viticulture. And I understand you're involved quite heavily, of course, in the national sales of your wines. With climate change on our minds currently, I have several questions for you about your approach to creating world-class wines that start in the vineyard. And the first one, I guess, would be, climate change has affected Napa greatly, Napa Valley, the last 5 years, particularly for this year's harvest, 2022. What were your main challenges, and what have you been doing differently to adapt?
Yeah, the last couple of years have been much more challenging than what I had experienced previously. Before that, obviously, growing up in the area, I wasn't paying as much attention as my dad was, being more hands-on. But in the last few years since I've joined on full-time in 2016, we had some pretty consistent, more or less easy growing harvests. Really, the last 3 years have been quite a challenge where we've had a few different challenges. 2020, obviously, with the fires, 2021 being kind of a severe drought year. And then this year, 2022, what looked like was going to be an amazing harvest all through the summer. All of a sudden, we were hit with about 6 days of 105 to 118 degree weather out here. The biggest thing that we can do is continue to use this as a learning opportunity every year and try to make some changes. With that kind of heat spike, we're hoping that that's not a continued trend year after year. But as we move forward, it's good for us to adapt and prepare for what might happen. So this last year, we experimented a little bit more with some shade cloth over the grapes to try to protect it from that extreme afternoon sun. Moving forward, we might try to develop the canopy of the vines a little bit more, just to try to protect and keep out some of the heat that might potentially come if we have another heat spell like that.
That makes sense. So with climate change, are you considering planting different varietal grapes or different clones of the current varietals?
We haven't put anything into practice yet. Obviously, like you said, with about half of our property planted, we're not able to completely replant everything at the same time. So every few years, we're pulling out a block or two and planting new varietals in those. This upcoming year, we're pulling out a couple blocks on the far side of our property. The only new varietal that we're experimenting with over there is Chenin Blanc, which we actually used to have planted back in the 80s. And so I'm excited to revisit that and see how it does, but we're hoping that it does well in some hotter weather. After that, at some point, I know a lot of the other vineyards in the area are starting to do this as well, but I think that it would be fun and interesting to kind of have a experimental block on property where we have a couple different rows of a few different varietals and rootstocks and experiment with some different practices just to see how they all turn out in the end.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So along the lines of climate change and sustainability, can you describe what Napa Green is and the fish-friendly farming initiatives and how you've been involved?
Yeah, so our property is Napa Green and fish friendly farming certified. It's a little bit of a mouthful to say, but basically, in a nutshell, that's trying to make sure you're as good of stewards to the land as possible. Trying to do as much sustainable farming as possible, so that you leave as little footprint or impact on the actual land that we have here. Obviously, you can see behind us, we're on a little bit of a slope here with the vineyard. All that, any kind of chemicals or products that we would put into the ground eventually would all run off into streams leading to the Napa River, leading to the bay. So we want to try to have as little impact on all those waterways as possible.
Okay, great. I'm so glad you're involved in that. And so how do you assure the best soil possible for your vineyard?
Couple different ways. We're blessed to have kind of stumbled on a great property, and so the soil out here is some of the best in the valley. We're kind of bookended by two canyons, one of which I'm sitting here on this end, so you can kind of see how narrow it gets up here. There's a lot of soil and alluvial fan that came off the hillside running down into the flat bottom where we have our vineyard planted. We are every year trying to, like I was saying before, be as sustainable as possible. So using as little chemicals in the vineyard. And then we're also planting in between all the rows every year to try to enrich and revive the soil while it's in its off season like this. And then when we go in and actually replant, a lot of the time we'll just let the field sit for a year just to kind of recoup and re-energize before we go back in and replant.
All the great ideas. So you're known for having well-balanced wines. Tell me why you think yours are so well-balanced, and what are your favorites among your portfolio?
Yeah, Calistoga is a really unique area. It's one of the narrowest parts in the Napa Valley. And so we get a lot of heat that comes in during the day. But then we also get a lot of cool weather that comes up over the hill from the Russian River and helps cool down the grapes at night. So it gives the fruit a lot of time to recover, which makes for some really unique, kind of bold wines, but very well-balanced wines as well. We're out here trying to take care of the land and really make the best wine that we can off what the land gives us. But we think that it starts here in the vineyard, and then the other big part of it, obviously, is the winemaking side. And we've been blessed to have a great winemaker since 2006. Kent Jarman has been making our wines, and he really has a meticulous eye on everything happening in the winemaking process. But overall, we've been blessed with the area that our property is in.
Truly, the wines start in the vineyard. Well, thank you for sending me these two. I'm looking forward to reviewing those for our readers. You sent the Cabernet Franc, and then your Chris's Cuvée, Cabernet Sauvignon. I'm looking forward to those. So I understand you've been doing wine tastings out of Fairwinds Estates in the past, but that you're building a new wine tasting room coming up in the next year or so. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we don't have an official date for the opening of the winery and tasting room. We're in kind of the initial planning phase for that. This was a dream that my dad started many years ago, starting going through the county and doing some planning to get approved to build a winery here on property. We now have that approval, and so it's on to the next phase of planning and developing the actual building. So hopefully within the next couple of years, we'll be able to welcome some guests out here and partake in basically this view behind us here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That'll be great. Well, definitely let us know when that's coming up, and we'll talk again. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Wanderings today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.